I'm going to keep this video as concise and to the point as I can. With everything I'm about to talk about, I do highly recommend you watch HBO's Watchmen. The intention of this video is to advise caution when both watching and making things that depict trauma from other cultures. And just making things in general, I think. I'm in no way claiming to be the best person to speak on the matter, or the most informed, but considering it hasn't been addressed significantly, I thought it would pay to do so, even if it's a little late. For my own integrity as an aspiring filmmaker and content creator, and for others who just like watching stuff. If it isn't obvious, this video will contain spoilers. I've had an interesting relationship with Watchmen. My first exposure to it was the Zack Snyder film, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't read the graphic novel for the first time until a few years ago, so with that I feel like my critique of this show comes from a place of moderate unbias. I really enjoyed the HBO show as well, like a lot. I don't think a superhero show has left such an impact on me. The ways in which Watchmen takes from the source material and builds off of it is incredibly interesting, while doing its darnest to respect it and all the while be its own confident entity. Mostly. With some time to reflect, there is something that still bugs me about the show. Something big that ruins the experience for me. Well, big might be putting it lightly. There's something HBO's Watchmen does that has made me have to reflect on the entirety of my cinematic experience, and the kinds of things I've learned from them. There are plenty of videos on here that discuss the show as a whole, the good, the bad and the ugly, and most do a pretty decent job at analysing what Watchmen presents, so I won't spend much time on that, and focus on the specific issue that completely turns this show upside down for me. Before I jump in, I'll say again, if you haven't seen this show, go and watch it. Better yet, go and read the graphic novel first, and then the show. Once you've done that, I'm interested to see what you think of what I'm going to say. But I'd like everyone to listen to it anyway. My issue boils down to one scene in this show. In fact, it's one of the last scenes, and a tame one at that. It's not bad because it ruins any source material, it's not bad because of some film technique gone astray. The scene I'm talking about fundamentally screws with the thematic power of filmmaking, particularly regarding real issues, and that scene is this one here.
Now you know everything. My origin story. I was sitting in this exact spot almost 100 years ago.
Now, on the surface, this scene is excellently done, and both actors damn near make me want to cry with their performances. This is some good shit. The gist of the scene is one of letting go and facing your fears and problems to move past them rather than hide behind a mask. Wounds need air. A very poignant quote and excellently delivered. It is also a message that fits well in the current climate, with the high concentration of comic book media, but that is part of the problem. There are a few layers to my issues here. Some surface ones, some revolving purely around the source material, and the much deeper one where the idea for this video came from. Now, the core of the issue is that Watchmen wants to have its cake and eat it too, by having you feel good that Will is able to finally fight racism and try his best to put an end to it, but then also wants to criticise him for apparently letting his anger and vengeance consume him, which Watchmen doesn't show at all. The show spends the entirety of the Will-focused episode showing how backed into a corner he is and how his hand is forced into being violent, but the show also doesn't make this out as a bad thing, because it's not. White supremacists literally want to brainwash black people into killing each other. He's completely justified and it makes no sense when he's accused of losing himself. But even if it was because of the trauma, that begs a bigger question. If the trauma of his parents being killed during a KKK attack still haunts him, that isn't a simple open and shut case either, because the root cause of that trauma is simply racism, and that doesn't not exist anymore. This event isn't like Batman or Spider-Man because those deaths were freak events with no super ulterior motive. Will's literally is because society condemns black people, which is still a hole we are trying to get out of now. So with that, why would you have the character say his actions were the wrong ones, when the show clearly shows that almost all of his actions are for a good cause. Racism is an ideology, a system of oppression which will continue to persist if we do not continually try to take it down, which is hard. It may not fully happen in our lifetime, but that does not mean it is a fight not worth fighting.
Wounds need air.
This quote here. This quote infuriates me. Is the show seriously trying to say that we should forget about racism and move on from it? Because that was Will's mission. He wasn't overcoming trauma, at least in the traditional sense. He wasn't out to take revenge. He was out to dismantle an ideology and save an entire race of people from subjugation. And that fight is far from over. So having a character who experienced white supremacy firsthand now say he needs to take a long hard look at himself and move on when the fight is still going is absolutely insane. And for a white person to have that be the message in a story is frankly fucking appalling. I'm going to preface this section by saying I have no problem with a white man telling a black story, or vice versa. Like my views on appropriation versus appreciation, with respect in the input of the culture in question, and not a purely profit mindset, by all means delve in. But with that also comes the need to learn more about the context of everything, and what you should learn from it, and what that actually means for the people in question. Which is funny because that's the show's ultimate message, which it somehow botches. Now, I'm not African American, and I'm not white either, but I'm a minority that has struggled with representation my whole life, so while I may not completely relate with the issues being carried out, I do understand it, and the troubles that arise when depicting that on screen. So, you've got a white guy saying that black people should move on. I get what they're going for, but why not look at racism as it stands now, rather than copping out and going with the obvious slavery and killing black people is bad, which most media seems to do. Because, no shit, that's bad. This is why movies like Crash absolutely suck, and why racism is allowed to continue, because contemporary media fails to recognise what racism actually looks like now, and reveal that to people so we can try and do better. And I'm not saying that we can't have films where slavery exists, it's fine, but it's extremely disproportionate and skews opinions on racism in the wrong direction. Because that's the only type of racism that's shown. Mainstream media is so afraid of criticising itself, and would rather put the blame on how things used to be, so they can move on and forget, rather than address the problems that still persist now. And this reveals how flawed we really are as creators, and shows one of the worst outcomes thematically you can have in this regard. We're at a point in life that we can all collectively agree that slavery is bad, but what about the subtle instances of racism that happen every day? And we need to ensure, as creators, that the content we create doesn't look at issues of the past as if they do not exist anymore, and provide accurate representations of how it affects people today, and how not only have we changed, but how the atrocities have changed too. They haven't disappeared. And as viewers, we also have a responsibility to call out when it's done incorrectly, to reduce how often this happens, otherwise everyone remains none the wiser. Because that's just it. Slavery might be looked at as objectively bad, but because the majority of depictions of racism only depict those objectively bad things, it frames racism as purely a black and white issue, where realistically, that is not true, because racism is far more complex than that. The portrayal of racism and similar atrocities in film continues to baffle me. Sometimes the nail is hit right on the head, but for the most part, the standouts are always the films that show the surface level stuff, which includes goddamn slavery. Why can't we move past this and show racism not as a thing of the past, but a thing that is still real now? Yes, we have moved past slavery, but slavery isn't racism. Slavery is a result of racism. We've just moved from one problem to the next, and while the problems have reduced in number, the ones present still contribute to the horrific power dynamic that exists in society. With that, it is important that past atrocities are acknowledged, and I will say that it is awesome to see the show look at an actual event that got swept completely under the radar, which I in fact had no idea about until watching it. It's great stuff, and I think fictional stories like Watchmen are a great avenue to explore real issues, and up until the end, it does a pretty good job at diving into this. I hope that this video makes you think about things a little differently when you watch them, and how the language of cinema can enhance and destroy your perception of something, regardless of how true it is or not. While cinema is meant to provide an escape, it is also an avenue of discovery and learning, and we should continue to ensure the people trying to make us learn something have actually learned the right thing themselves, so we can continue to be better, and so future generations can all be equally inspired to do so as well.